The following programme contains descriptions of real-life violence that some viewers may find distressing.
It was vicious, it was ferocious. It was a horrific attack on an elderly woman.
She had been struck at least 30 blows to her head and face.
She had fractures to her skull, cheekbone was broken. It's at times hard to fathom how another human could do that to another human.
Attacked in our own home and killed. The town was shocked.
He was deemed to be the most dangerous man in Britain. He was on the run and he was desperate.
The number one priority was to locate him and catch him as quick as we could. He was a real risk to the public.
Nestled in the rolling hills of Northumberland lies the picturesque town of Hexham.
Hexham is a good place to be. It's a very established community, lots going on here. It's welcoming.
You walk up the streets, everybody speaks, everybody knows you. It's just a lovely town.
Hexham has a very close-knit community. It's exactly what you'd expect in a rural area.
It's also got a lot of farmland around it, a really good quality of life. It's regularly voted as one of the best places in the country to live.
It's quite affluent. It's a thriving market town with pubs, shops, everything you'd expect to find in a rural part of Northumberland.
It's got a beautiful cobbled market square, beautiful abbey, very quiet, low crime rate, not a great deal happens there.
But the peace in pretty Hexham is about to be shattered.
We received a call from a member of the public in Newcastle city centre, which was probably 30 miles from Hexham. The member of the public had been walking through one of the streets in the centre of Newcastle and had found a handbag on the top of a public bin on the side of a pavement.
They saw the bag and thought it was a bit odd because I think it was in quite good condition, and they took it and handed it into the police as lost property.
It was apparent there were no valuables there, so the suspicion was it had been taken with the intention of taking whatever was in it.
The police searched the handbag to see if they could identify who it belonged to, and inside they found some ID.
The ID was in the name of 77-year-old Hexham pensioner Judith Richardson.
Officers were dealing with what they thought was just a lost bag.
The police in Newcastle got in touch with the police in Hexham, and the police in Hexham went around to the home of Miss Richardson to explain to her that her property had been found.
When the officers got to Hexham and called at Judith's address, they were expecting to find someone who would answer the call and probably say that the bag had been stolen.
But when police knock, there's no answer. With concerns about Judith's age, they decide to gain entry.
When they got in, they found Judith dead in the hallway of her flat.
It was clear from the injuries sustained, which were horrific, that, someone had done this. It was clear that it was a homicide because of the level of injury.
She had been struck at least 30 blows to her head and face.
And that's when they began a murder investigation.
I was head of the CID for Northumbria Police at that time. The senior investigating officer that was conducting the investigation at that point came to see me and briefed me about the occurrence. This was a completely random attack. We were simply presented with a body in the passageway of a house. We didn't have any idea at that time who the offender was.
Officers piece together what they can about who Judith was.
She lived on her own in a small flat in a very nice part of Hexham. She was just a normal person living in the community and going about her daily business.
She had a very, very simple life. She didn't have any close family in the sense of children. She was a spinster and lived by herself with a dog. She was well known to the local church where she attended regularly. She was a real pillar of the community.
With nothing untowards in Judith's life, investigators turn to the scene of the crime.
The first things to do are to secure the scenes, and the scene at the address is the first scene where the body is, but obviously there's the corresponding scene in Newcastle city centre, which is the handbag and the bin. So we've got to take control of those scenes to then enable us to conduct inquiries in the right way so we don't lose evidence.
There's no evidence of a break-in, but it's clear drawers and cupboards have been ransacked, so forensic officers focus on items of interest to see if they hold clues.
On the floor of the hallway of Miss Richardson's home, when her body was discovered, was an Age UK leaflet. Fingerprint was discovered on it. A tissue was found that was stained with blood and found within the bedroom of Miss Richardson's home.
While the tissue and the leaflet are sent to the lab for tests, Judith's body is carefully removed and examined by a pathologist.
I was the crime scene photographer in the post-mortem. Judith was a 77-year-old woman. Reminded me of my grandma a little bit, and the attack was so severe, it is at times hard to fathom how another human could do that to another human. There were a lot of injuries to photograph. She had fractures to her skull, cheekbone was broken, there were lacerations and bruising to the brain, and she had a lot of bruising all over her body. And Judith had a number of kind of cuts and defensive wounds as well on her hands and fingers. It was really clear that the cause of death was from blunt force trauma. And there was some speculation at that time that it could have been caused by something like a hammer. I think everybody was quite shocked just at how brutal and savage this attack was.
Something like this would, and indeed did, send shockwaves through the entire community. It's totally unexpected. The ferocity of the attack was absolutely exceptional, and particularly to happen in a place like Hexham.
Couldn't believe that a little old woman would be attacked in this town, you know, just didn't know who was loose about. Oh, it was terrible. The town was shocked.
Investigators turn their attention to the place where Judith's bag was found, in the hope they can discover who may have dumped it there.
The senior investigating officer at the time made a really good call early on to obviously focus on the bin and the surrounding area, and in particular the CCTV that covered that part of the city, and try and lock down any CCTV, particularly in Newcastle city centre, that may overlook the bin in question. But it was really important that detectives were sent to secure any cameras from shops, business premises, from public CCTV on lampposts or whatever, to ensure that none of the evidence or potential evidence was lost. And then it was a case of trawling through to ascertain who put the bag on top of the bin. A little squad of officers were put onto the reviewing of the CCTV. One of the officers started by focusing on the bin at around the time that the member of the public had called it in. So working backwards from that time, there was only one camera, I understand, covering that bin, and it was a long distance shot with a very poorly pixelated image that showed the bin.
Something piques the detective's interest.
Looked like a bus had pulled up near to the bin. A number of people had gotten off the bus. Could that have been the time when the bag was discarded at the bin? That grainy image then necessitated a contact with the bus company, who could only provide, you know, a rough outline of lots of buses. You know, we didn't have one particular bus at a particular time on a particular street. So we were presented with, you know, quite a volume of CCTV, which has to be manually viewed. And it's a real arduous task. It's time-consuming, it's difficult, it's painstaking, but that's the basis of what good detective work is.
But the hard graft soon pays off.
On one of the buses, there was an image from the cab of the driver which saw a man get off at Clayton Street at the relevant point. And actually, as he gets off the bus, his arm moves to the left and he places what we now know to be the bag on top of the bin. The number one priority was to locate him and catch him as quick as we could.
In Hexham, Northumberland, 77-year-old Judith Richardson has been found bludgeoned to death in her own home. CCTV has been uncovered showing a man getting off a bus in Newcastle and placing Judith's handbag on a bin. Police need to retrace their suspect's steps to track him down urgently.
There were hundreds and hundreds of hours of CCTV which they had to check in order to track down this footage, which was of him on the bus.
So from that we got a description. The officers then went back in time and looked at the same CCTV from other cameras on the bus, and there in clear view, up the centre of the bus, sat in the middle, was the offender.
They had CCTV of him sitting on the back of the bus with the bag on his lap, which was absolutely crucial.
Not hiding it, in open display, and it was on camera. So that gave us the clue that he's probably the man that's committed this crime. From there was a huge amount of work went on. One, backtracking on the bus to see where he'd come from, but two, to follow through where had he gone after depositing the bag. Now that necessitated several cameras in the city centre to be cross-referenced and cross-checked, but we had a description from the clear imagery off the bus of this individual wearing a green shirt. And it was on different cameras on a different street that this individual was spotted going into a jeweller's shop. When officers then went to the shop, there was CCTV inside the jewellers, and there's the offender pawning or selling what turned out to be Judith's jewellery. Once it was identified that he'd been into this particular jeweller's, officers were deployed to go and conduct inquiries. They spoke to the owner of the store, who provided a ledger where he'd signed a name. G. Jarman. I think it's fair to say that when officers recovered the ledger and the signature in the name of G. Jarman, they didn't for 1 minute think that that would be the actual name of the person in question. I think everybody thought it would be a made-up name, but unbelievably, it wasn't. And G. Jarman became the focus of our attention at that time. The SIO conducted immediate inquiries on the police national computer and identified that he was a missing sex offender from the Durham area. He'd been arrested for a shoplifting offence a few days before the murder and bailed to court, but had not appeared at court. So that was an immediate trigger for Durham to then raise the alarm and concern about this individual. who was now known as Graham Jarman.
Investigators are shocked when they uncover Jarman's criminal history.
He was a very, very dangerous individual. Obviously, Durham Constabulary, which is the force next down south from Northumbria, they had been managing him as a sex offender. So an officer, a risk management officer, would have been regularly visiting Jarman. They were going to be the font of knowledge around who this person was, his background, his hobbies, his habits, his lifestyle. And that individual provided us with significant information to paint this very detailed picture of who we were actually dealing with. An incredibly dangerous man.
He was previously identified as the most dangerous man in Britain in the early 90s. He was guilty of the most horrendous sex crime, where he kidnapped a 17-year-old, put her in the back of a car, used a horrendous expression, "I'm your everyday psycho." He was also involved in a series of armed robberies, so he had a criminal career which dated right back to his early 20s, really. Bearing in mind he was in his 40s and even had spent most of his adult life in prison.
His previous convictions were horrendous. There was rape, kidnap. He'd been to prison several times for long stretches of jail time. I think 15 years was one of them, 8 years was another. To say that he was a dangerous individual was an understatement.
But as detectives discover, Jarman hadn't always followed a life of crime.
People who knew him from the 80s think that he seems to be a very different person from the one that they knew then to who became this really aggressive, violent man committing a lot of crime.
Graham Jarman had worked as a civil servant, as I recall it, and then something had plainly happened that triggered him into a world of not just criminality, but criminality of the most serious type. And I don't know, certainly for certain, what that thing was that happened in his life, although, like everyone I've seen, it reported that he had a particularly significant reaction to discovering that he was adopted.
This is when it's believed Jarman's life started to spiral out of control.
He used betting shops a lot, as far as I'm aware. He's had gambling problems.
He had a compulsion to violence and sexual offending and robbery because of his gambling addiction, and was prepared to do anything, and then just seemed to, you know, suffer the consequences, really.
He was a loner, he had no friends, he was quite articulate. He enjoyed reading broadsheet newspapers, but he was a horrible, nasty individual.
But police need to link Jarman with the place where Judith was killed, Hexham.
The guys then worked on the CCTV off the buses and were able to backtrack him to Prudder, which is another little area in Northumberland, and then from there he actually got off a bus from Hexham in Prudder, went into a shop, and then got onto this bus and into Newcastle. So it was in effect backtracking back into Hexham, which is what they were able to do.
To track Jarman's movements in Hexham, investigators speak to businesses with CCTV. Chris Dunlop's pub is on the main thoroughfare into the town centre.
Police came in, asked if they could use the cameras to have a look if anyone had walked past, because we have a camera on one side of the building, a camera on the other side of the building. And it was just by chance that he'd walked past this camera and he was on this camera, and they just thought he was a strange man, so they followed him. There's the camera there that caught him walking past on the road.
What we've been able to pull together from the compilation of the CCTV is that Jarman had indeed come to Hexham on the 17th. He'd stayed overnight in a guest house on the first night. On the second night, he apparently had slept rough somewhere in Hexham. And on the day of the murder, the Friday the 19th, he'd been seen walking up and down various locations in the centre of Hexham.
I think that the CCTV put him in Hexham observing elderly women. From what's known now, potentially looking for victims, for targets. And I know that there was CCTV of him leaving a hardware store in Hexham and Judith was entering.
Police now have a link between Jarman and the murder victim. But that's not all.
In the period before the killing of Miss Richardson, he was caught on CCTV walking towards her home. And in the period after her killing, he was captured by the same camera walking away from her home.
Round about the same time that we received an update from the forensic services saying that we received a forensic hit on a fingerprint that had been found on an Age UK form that had been left in Judith's house. And that fingerprint also matched the name Graham Jarman.
Also, his DNA was found on a tissue that was blood-stained within the bedroom at her home where she had been attacked.
In the meantime, there's been another big development.
A hammer was found in a Aldi plastic carrier bag. It was found on the wall of one of the neighbours.
The hammer was examined and DNA was discovered on it.
Blood and hair found on the head of the hammer matches the DNA profile of none other than Judith Richardson. But Graham Jarman's whereabouts are unknown.
Once we come to terms with the fact that we've got a really serious offender with a background that is just unbelievably violent and aggressive and whose mental state is such that, you know, he's been described as a psychopath, it's absolutely imperative to get a hold of the individual. So we had to try and track him down. To protect the public, he had to be captured very, very quickly.
In Hexham, Northumberland, 47-year-old Graham Jarman is wanted in connection with the robbery and murder of pensioner Judith Richardson. After finding his fingerprint and DNA at the crime scene, police need to track him down urgently. Jarman's mother tells detectives he hasn't been seen at their home in Consett, County Durham, for weeks.
I know that he lived with his mother at the time of the murder. It was quite a curious relationship in the sense that she gave him money to spend.
His mother controlled him to a great degree and stopped him from, presumably, to stop him gambling everything away. But it also became apparent that she'd left in the weeks preceding to go and visit family.
So his source of income had been lost. She'd spent his allowance because of his gambling habits.
And Jarman had actually stolen from his own mother. He'd taken a DVD player and sold it, and then when he realised the mother was coming back, that was his switch to say, time for me to leave. And that's when he started the offending.
Investigators launch a manhunt. They need to retrace their suspect's steps after he pawned Judith's jewellery in Newcastle.
He was followed on CCTV, getting into a taxi which we believe went to Gosforth, which is an area at the north of Newcastle, and his whereabouts thereafter were unknown. He would jump on buses and travel all over the area, but his background and his previous offending meant that this was really #1 priority for primarily North East forces. The first priority really was to come up with a press strategy, which then meant speaking to the media, getting the message out, identifying who he was with photographs and imagery that we had to get the public to be the eyes and ears for the police.
Journalists and reporters from all over the North East are enlisted to help.
We were called in for a briefing by Northumbria Police in order to explain the background to the case, the fact that he was on the run, the fact that they needed the public to try and keep an eye out for him in very simple terms, released a picture of him and appealed for assistance in tracking him down. He was deemed to be the most dangerous man in Britain, yet again having previously been identified as the most dangerous man in Britain in the early 90s. And as soon as his name became public, we were aware of the really horrendous background of offending, which he was guilty of and had been found guilty of previously, so that you knew you had a very, very dangerous individual who was out at large.
To add to the investigators' woes, Jarman is already one step ahead.
He was seen in a supermarket where he changed his clothing, so he was changing his appearance to make it much harder to track and find him.
We do know that he'd purchased a set of hair trimmers and he'd shaved his head to try and change his appearance. He was almost bald, or looked, you know, very closely shaven. The search was really about understanding him and trying to preempt where he was going to go. And what we thought was really important was to get the expert input from a forensic psychologist, which is what we did.
The reason they brought in a psychologist, although it sounds a bit like Cracker the TV series, was really to try and identify his motivations, his pattern of behaviour, what he was likely to do while he was on the run.
That psychologist came up to Durham and assisted with us, and we spent hours with that individual poring over who Graham Jarman was. He was able to paint this picture of the sort of mindset. He classed him as a psychopath plus.
The psychologist tried to identify what he might do next. He'd been living with his mum, so the chances were he was on the run and alone and was trying to fend for himself, really. Where would he get money from? Could he potentially target another elderly victim?
The psychologist was then able to build and draw and come up with a really detailed offender profile of Jarman, which didn't only look at his history, but almost got into his head and his mindset of what he'd be thinking, what he'd be concerned about, what he'd be planning. And from that fed into our strategy for press releases to the public. When we were asking the public, rather than just saying, this guy's wanted, please tell us if you see him, we had to provide something more, and we were able to do that. The profile indicated that he was transient. He would travel on public transport, in particular buses. He would go into bookmakers to place his bets, if he had any money, that was. He liked going into libraries where he would sit and read. So this all had to be passed out to the public to try and get them to engage and be really vigilant.
Soon, a result. There's a sighting of Jarman in a betting shop some 50 miles south of Newcastle, in Saltburn. Then, 2 days later, he's found on CCTV entering a supermarket 20 miles west, in Yarm. For the manhunt team, this is a worrying trend.
As the days developed, we received sightings, information from other forces that suggested he was transient and moving. He'd gone as far south as Cleveland, and we had sightings in Stockton and other places in and around that area, which brought Cleveland police into the mix. So we now had the three northeast forces, Northumbria, Durham and Cleveland, one on top of the other, going south, and it was apparent that Jarman was on the move. And there was reason to believe he was potentially going to commit crime as he moved down. And there was a suggestion that he was potentially going right to the southern coast to see family and friends down there.
Forces in the southeast are also put on high alert.
And that's when it was press the red button, and it becomes a really multi-force chase. We even contacted Sussex police at one point to give them the heads up that he may be on the way down, so they could start and advertise the fact that this individual may just suddenly appear on their patch.
There was information put out that people and the public should not approach him. It was recognition that he was a violent man, he was quite a dangerous man. They had more police presence in libraries. They put more presence around kind of betting shops.
There were meeting after meeting, hours and hours of research went into tracking him down. But every time we got a sighting, we were always that one step behind it. By the time we got the notification and went and checked the CCTV and confirmed it was him, he'd obviously moved. So it was frustrating. And not all of the sightings were actually of Jarman, and that was another frustration, and it always is on a manhunt like this, where every single request has got to be assessed, visited and checked out. We had several sightings that were Jarman, others were not and had to be discounted.
The manhunt team makes one final push.
We took the decision to really ramp up the media engagement and appeals to the public. And I took the lead on that in terms of conducting a number of interviews.
I'm appealing directly to the public and indeed to Mr. Jarman to give himself up.
I think I did about 14 individual interviews with different media outlets, local news, TV, newspapers, radio stations, to push this message and really go for it in a big way to try and get that message loud and clear to the public.
We need to speak to him as a matter of urgency.
Days later, news comes in from Yorkshire.
A librarian in Filey in North Yorkshire had heard the press appeal, had gone into work on Saturday morning, and she'd put Jarman's face, that was released in the media, on her computer screen as a screensaver, and got on with her business. And she was walking around the library that particular morning when, lo and behold, there's an individual sat reading a newspaper in front of her, and she realised it was Jarman, the very person we were looking for.
Obviously aware of the fact that he was dangerous, but aware of the fact that this fugitive was in her midst. She did exactly the right thing, immediately got in touch with police, kept an eye on him to make sure he wasn't going anywhere, and not give away any kind of suspicion at all, which is obviously crucial in that context.
2 local bobbies turned up.
I was sat in Filey Library, just minding my own business, and I was just sat there, and then the police came in. I was wondering what was going on, and it turns out that they were after the man that was sat next to me on the computer, who was actually terrifying, to be honest.
He gave a cock and bull story about it not being him. They called in their more experienced sergeant, who took none of it.
And he just stood up and went quite quietly, to be fair. He didn't kick off, didn't do anything, he just got up and left.
They promptly arrested him on suspicion of murder. And a live scan fingerprint check quickly revealed that we had our man.
In Filey, North Yorkshire, Graham Jarman has been arrested on suspicion of the murder and robbery of Hexham pensioner Judith Richardson. The 2-week manhunt, covering hundreds of miles across the northeast, is finally over.
It was an absolute relief to hear that news. I was delighted that he'd been captured, and to hear that it was in a library was the icing on the cake in terms of where we presumed he would be. There was a lot of pressure on us as a law enforcement agencies to actually get a hold of this individual. There was a massive threat and risk to the public. It would have been a real tragedy had anybody else been hurt or indeed killed. So I was absolutely delighted with the combined efforts of all the police involved in the various forces. But I've also got to say that was just half of the story. Catching him was one thing, but building a case against him was the real issue. Arrangements would have been made for Northumbria officers to go down to Filey, pick him up and transport him back to Northumbria, where obviously the SIO and his team progressed with interviews.
As I recall it, during the course of the extensive interviews that the police conducted with Graham Jarman, he did give an account of where he had been and what he said he had done.
And then, proceeded to give the various excuses about why he had the bag and belongings with Judith.
His account of the handbag was that he had been walking along the road where Judith Richardson lived.
He claimed that he'd simply been outside of Judith's property and saw the handbag lying on the wall and had picked it up, claiming that the real killer must have left it. Obviously, that was complete nonsense.
In the meantime, investigators uncover more evidence of Jarman's crime spree.
It turns out that a couple of offences had been committed by him. On the way down, I think he was either in Whitby or Bridlington, he'd gone to the coast and observed a young fella parking his car up, getting a surfboard off the roof of his car, and then putting a wetsuit on and going into the sea. Jarman saw that as an opportunity to break into his car and stole, amongst other things, a wallet with the young guy's identification and credit cards and things. He then went into a shoe shop where a lone female store attendant was present, and he robbed her of money. And on leaving that store, he dropped an identity card which was actually stolen from the car that he'd attacked when the surf had gone into the sea, which again I think was used to try and bluff his way when the officers arrived to speak to him at the library in Filey.
After 3 days of intensive interviewing, detectives believe they have a compelling case against Graham Jarman.
His DNA placed him at the scene. They had details of the journey to where the bag was dumped. They had CCTV of him dumping the bag. They had him on the bus with the bag. He gave his name when he went to the pawnbroker's note to sell Judith's valuables. The evidence against him was overwhelming.
The SIO and the team put the case to the CPS, and Jarman was charged with Judith's murder.
Paul Greene KC is appointed to represent Jarman in court.
I have a clear recollection of my first meeting with Graham Jarman. What struck me about him was that he was plainly an intelligent individual and a clear-thinking individual who had his own ideas about his own case. So he certainly didn't present to me as an everyday psychopath. If you hadn't known what he had done in the past and what he was accused of doing, you wouldn't have guessed. He was straightforward, and certainly I didn't find him at all a difficult person to deal with. But at all stages, Graham Jarman denied that he was responsible for the murder of Miss Richardson and made clear that he intended to have a trial.
Graham Jarman finally faces justice at Newcastle Crown Court. He pleads not guilty to the murder of Judith Richardson.
He sits in court and he doesn't give away anything when the evidence is being outlined, because the jury are there, and obviously be aware of the fact that the jury are watching him, so tend not to show any emotion for obvious reasons.
The prosecution outlines Jarman's motive.
He was a gambling addict. He didn't have much money to his name.
The assumption is that he was simply looking for a victim in order to try and get a source of money, really. Prior to the murder, he was seen in Hexham, clearly targeting elderly people, elderly women, in order to rob them, basically.
But the prosecution sets out how Jarman clearly has violence in mind.
The CCTV played an important part in tracking him, leaving Beals, it's called, where he'd actually stole the hammer from. And I believe that's where they think that he spotted Judith as a target.
After following Judith home, Jarman waits outside, then charms his way in, pretending to be from Age UK, and accidentally drops the leaflet in the hallway.
It was a truly shocking attack. He brutally assaulted her repeatedly with a hammer.
He'd gone and started ransacking her property, and then he beat her for a second time,
leaving her dead in the passageway of a house.
It's believed Jarman cleans himself up at the scene, dropping the bloodied tissue containing his DNA. and then leaves with Judith's stolen handbag.
And the prosecutor made quite clear to the jury that the level of violence he used was completely, you know, horrific, but also unnecessary given the context. He could have walked in, taken all the valuables and walked out. There was no need to take her life. Jarman didn't take the stand, and given the level of evidence against him, you can understand why that is the case.
We knew that we were facing a complex and difficult case. Graham Jarman was demonstrated to have been in possession of the handbag of Miss Richardson, and it was proved and indeed acknowledged by him that he had pawned some jewellery that belonged to her, getting £300 or about that for it, and even signing his own name for the receipt. Also, part of the case against him at trial was that he had changed his appearance in the period after the killing of Miss Richardson, to which his response was, "I'm a shoplifter and I regularly change my appearance so as to reduce the prospect of being detected for that crime."
The jury retires to consider its verdict.
The jury was in retirement for a number of days.
And eventually, the jury decided he was guilty of the said offence. The SIO and his team had delivered excellent evidence. It was overwhelming.
It was inevitable that the judge would impose a very lengthy minimum term, which he did. A term of 35 years that Mr. Jarman will have to serve before he can apply for parole.
A very, very long sentence was given, and I don't think he'll ever be released. I don't think he'll ever deemed to be safe, even when he's an elderly man.
The brutality of Judith's killing still haunts her town of Hexham.
This was a targeted attack for financial gain. And the really sad part about that is that from what he got, he actually only got £300. So this brutal murder took place for £300.
I'm sure the people in Hexham would have had a really negative impact by this crime. It's very rare, certainly in a lovely area like the market town that is Hexham.
I do think that justice has been served for Judith, but I don't think that Graham should have actually been out in the community. He had a really long, violent history. Had he been in jail, then this crime may not have occurred, and I think that's the really sad part.
Please be aware that this programme contains themes of domestic violence.
This was a sadistic, brutal murder. Residents were terrified.
This poor woman was covered head to foot in bruises.
And burn marks applied with a domestic iron.
It was just shocking. There's no other word for it.
He was a manipulative psychopath. He is a very dangerous individual.
She described him as a monster.
He's shown no remorse or no responsibility.
That level of evil demonstrates that he's a danger to any woman.
Just south of Derby city centre lies the bustling former village of Normanton.
It's a very multicultural area. People from all different parts of the world live there.
It really embraces diversity. I think at one time there was over 100 different languages and dialects spoken within that area.
It's also quite a close-knit community. A lot of people sort of know each other. Families tend to live quite close to each other, and they socialise in family and friend circles.
There's a lot of families that have lived there for many years, and as a consequence of that, people know each other's business and they're there to support each other when things might not go so well.
The communities sort of live together and work together. It does feel like a village in that environment.
It's somewhere that's always very, very busy, very, very vibrant, and there's always a lot of people on the streets, no matter what time of day it is.
In the heart of Normanton is Pear Tree Crescent.
Pear Tree Crescent has a distinct feel about it, and with it being on a crescent, it's quite contained. Families know their neighbours, and it's not a through road, so it's probably quite a quiet crescent without busy traffic going through it. So it's easy to see how it might have a community feel about it.
But life in this little backwater is about to change forever.
Emergency service.
The police received a call to say there'd been an incident in Normanton.
The report is in relation to an address on Pear Tree Crescent.
A man said that there was a body in the house.
So immediately the police were put into place. An immediate response to go to the address might be that they are not dead. So one of the fundamentals of policing is around protecting life.
Police go to the address on Pear Tree Crescent. They try to gain entry to the address. There's no reply there, so the decision's made to force entry. They force the front door because they're concerned about the safety of the people that may be inside the address. Once inside the address, they go upstairs and they enter the bathroom.
They found the body of a female in the bath.
The young woman is Asian and in her late 30s.
They find her in an unusual position. She is sat in the bath, she has got a towel over her, and she's got a shower curtain over her as well.
The shower rail had been pulled down and was lying on top of her or very close to her body in the bath.
And it was very quickly ascertained that she was dead.
And it was quite obvious to them that she had suffered catastrophic injuries.
This poor woman was covered head to foot in bruises. It was horrific, dreadful.
She has been savagely beaten around the head, face and limbs.
They will have been very quickly aware of the types of injuries that had occurred and that, you know, to all intents and purposes, this wasn't a natural death. You know, it had been the subject of a violent assault.
And that this was a sadistic and brutal murder and not just any other murder.
What the police did notice when they went into the bathroom was that the lock on the door was forced.
And I think that the police would have been weighing up the possibility that she had been trying to run away from her attacker.
She has been trying to seek refuge. She's tried to find a place in the house where she could go, where she could lock the door, and hopefully help would come.
Police descended on the street. They came from a number of police stations within just a couple of miles of the scene, cordoned off the road. I vividly remember forensics were on the scene. Extremely quickly, residents were told to stay indoors. They were completely stunned and shocked by what had happened.
The scenes of crimes officers come in, unpeeling the layers of the crime scene, whether that's fingerprints, whether that's DNA. Things like the shower curtain would have been collected and bagged and tagged, taken away for further examination, etc., working through the crime scene.
As investigators carry out house-to-house inquiries, the top priority for police is to get a name for the victim.
It's the police who should be going and finding the family of that person and telling them their loved ones has passed away. What you can't do is allow social media or any other method of that person's name getting out before the family knows. It's incumbent on the police to get that identity at the earliest opportunity.
The woman identified as living at the property is 37-year-old Sobia Khan.
I have a general recollection that she was, by all accounts, a terrific woman.
She was from Bradford. She had moved to Derby in the previous weeks.
She's worked with children for 4 years in Bradford, for young kids, as a play worker.
She was a very friendly, very kind and polite woman, having spoken to those people around her. She loved children. She had a huge passion for her job, had absolutely everything to live for.
A very bright, very intelligent young woman, but she was very family-orientated as well.
Sobia was loved and adored by her family. Her brother described her as the light of the family. She didn't have any children, but played a massive part in the lives of the children in the family and also those older members, and almost acted like the glue of the family. She brought a lot of people together and brought joy and happiness to those other people in her life.
And I think one of her life goals was to have children and, you know, to have a family of her own.
In a heartbreaking way, that was cut tragically short.
News of the murder comes on one of the holiest days for local Muslims, the beginning of Ramadan.
Residents were terrified. This is a sort of peaceful street in Normanton. It's quite well-to-do, quite respected street, and I just remember them being absolutely shocked by what was unfolding in front of them.
In Normanton, it would probably have the same effect as anywhere else. The community are justifiably shocked and, to an element, scared as well. But I think it's like a lot of communities where this type of crime takes place, that the communities kind of come together and rally round.
You don't get anything of this magnitude in Normanton, barely ever. Something of this scale, something this unique is extremely rare.
The body is carefully removed and sent for a post-mortem.
The pathology report was horrendous and painted a picture of the most brutal murder possible. There was 36 injuries all over her body. It was clear multiple weapons had been used.
And these injuries haven't been inflicted in one go. They've been inflicted over a period of time. They involve burn marks, which are consistent with being applied with a domestic iron. There are marks where Sobia's been hit with an implement. There's also blunt force trauma, which is feet and fists.
It was a very prolonged and systematic attack. It wasn't something that was very instantaneous, so this had been going on for some time.
Which must have been an absolutely awful experience to undergo. Just a terrible, terrifying ordeal that she's been put through.
The precise cause of death, as far as I can remember, was not ascertainable. She died from her injuries, this poor woman.
The type of person responsible for something like this is evil, sadistic, and without any humanity.
It was just shocking. There's no other word for it. It was just shocking. It was horrific.
In order to track this brutal killer, investigators continue to comb for clues left at the scene.
Police will try to work out exactly what had happened to Sobia, and a murder weapon or weapons would have been high on their priority.
The physical search of the property is really successful. There's a couple of items that are found early on which are really helpful to the inquiry. There is a rod that is found down the back of a radiator. There is a piece of wood that looks like it may have been from a coat hanger.
Which it was suggested was responsible for some of the injuries that she sustained.
As part of their search, police found a domestic iron that was found in a wheelie bin at the rear of the property.
And this is consistent with some of the burn injuries, and the distinctive shape of the iron matches the injuries that Sobia has on her body. So the next concern for the police is who is the perpetrator for this. And the worrying thing is for the police at this point is that somebody may have committed a murder and they're out in the public and they're free to go and do whatever it is that they want to. If they want to flee, if they want to destroy evidence. So there's a real sense of urgency now to try and establish who the perpetrator is and get them under arrest at the earliest opportunity.
Investigators trace Sobia's extended family who live nearby.
They speak to a man who is there. And it turns out that this man is the person who called the emergency services and tells them that an incident has taken place on Pear Tree Crescent. He tells the police that his brother had confessed to murdering Sobia Khan. He is Sobia's husband, Atwal Mustafa.
In Normanton, Derbyshire, 37-year-old Sobia Khan has been found at home in her bath, beaten to death. Police need to trace her husband, Atwal Mustafa, urgently. He hasn't been seen since.
By this point, police have interviewed at length and thoroughly family members, and they would have concluded that Atwal Mustafa is the prime suspect. When I saw the photo, I sat there and I remember looking at it on my computer screen thinking, here is a woman who looks free, who looks happy, who looks joyful, who's got a whole future ahead of her.
Her family says Sobia is considered very vibrant and outgoing. She's very keen on social media and socialising.
And that was not the sort of account that residents were giving me who were living nearby the house. That was not the sort of life that they had seen her live.
Investigators put Atwal and Sobia's married life together under the microscope.
They established from the family that Atwal had met Sobia in and around May 2016. It was around that time that she said that she'd met somebody and wanted to get married.
And she wanted to leave the family home at Bradford and go and relocate at Derby to be with this person. This came as huge news to Sobia's family. They'd never met who this person was. They didn't know where he lived, what he did. And although they were happy for her, they were also very cautious as well, because they cared about her and they wanted to make sure that she was going into a supportive relationship, and they just didn't have that information immediately available to them.
During their courtship, Atwal decides to meet Sobia's family in Bradford, but bizarrely he does so undercover, posing as a social worker.
He turns up, identifies himself as Asif, and quite quickly Sobia's brother starts to become suspicious of this man and wonders whether he is who he actually says he is.
I think what Mustafa was doing was using this as a ruse to try and check on the family, to see what sort of people they were.
He was very kind of secretive in terms of his background and who he was.
Sobia's family, in the days after, put two and two together and realised that this man was not a social worker and was actually in a relationship with her. And I think that certainly gave them great concern and worry. This was not something that she had done before, and I think it sparked a lot of fear among her family members that this was a path that she was going down.
And as a police officer, I then start to question, why would this person invent such an account to try and find out about another family in such a secretive, clandestine way? It does make you wonder what his motives are for this.
A few months later, in August 2016, Atwal tries to make his intentions towards Sobia clear.
What Atwal does is he arranges then for his family in Derby to travel to Bradford to meet Sobia's family. And again, this is all part of the two families getting to know each other.
Mustafa travelled with the intention of trying to get their approval for marriage plans, and he basically came with gifts to try and woo them and persuade them, and he would do anything he could to try and get what he wanted.
He continued to court the family, to ingratiate himself within that family environment and win people over.
But Sobia's family remain unimpressed with her new suitor.
Sobia's family warned her that this was a terrible idea, and they tried their absolute best to say that going to Derby was a bad idea and that this man was not right for her. Unfortunately, she would not accept this and did not believe it.
Time passes by and we are into April 2017, and Sobia contacts her friend who's a beautician, and she tells her the great news that she's going to be getting married and she's looking to book some treatments. So it seems to be quite an exciting time for her. On the 19th of April 2017, Mustafa collects Sobia from Bradford and he takes her to Derby and they move in together.
When they came to get married at their home in Derby, there was hardly anybody there. The imam was a friend of Mustafa. It's clear that the ceremony was a sham.
It was a very small ceremony. It was very informal, probably not the sort of wedding that she had dreamed of. Her family were not there.
And there's a considerable doubt whether it can properly be described as a marriage. But she may well have believed that they were actually married because of this ceremony that he'd set up.
It was hidden, it was done very quickly, almost a feel to get the ceremony over with.
I think it was also a way of exerting control over her, telling her that she was now beholden to her husband. It seems that he suggested to Sobia that when she joined him in Derby, she would become completely isolated from family and friends. It was clear that he wanted her relationship to be solely with him, and he was going to cut her off from the family.
Just a day after the marriage, all of her social media profiles were deleted.
And it's clear that this was his ongoing attempt and decision to isolate her completely, both physically and virtually, from her family and friends. She was quite a gregarious, outgoing, independent-minded person. So this points to the degree of control and manipulation that he was able to exert.
She finds herself in a strange city without that support network around her, and this is a really worrying event in the timeline.
Police uncover records of something even more sinister, which occurred that same day.
Sobia presented at the Derby Royal Infirmary with abdominal pains.
There's no indication as to what that was, but I think there's certainly a fear that this was the start of a campaign of domestic abuse that she had started to suffer.
On the 1st of May, we see yet another worrying turn in this saga. Sobia phones her family up and confesses that she's been having an affair. Now, her family aren't entirely convinced about this phone call, and what it seems is that somebody's in the background telling her exactly what to say. Bizarrely, a few moments after this phone call has taken place, Mustafa then phones up. He says it was all a joke and he's forgiven her and there's actually no problems. These clearly aren't the normal things to do during the course of a normal relationship. It really starts to demonstrate a pattern of controlling behaviour.
2 days later, Mustafa and Sobia went to Bradford to see her family, and they were shocked when she walked in the house. She was wearing a full veil, a niqab, and hands and face were completely covered. This was something they'd never seen before. They didn't see it in their own family. She was very westernised, so this was really, really out of character.
This is a very, very different person, and it is quite clear that Mustafa has now got absolute control.
Sobia then disappears off the face of the earth until her brother receives a disturbing phone call.
Sobia calls her brother up, then starts accusing him of inappropriate behaviour when they were both children. Now, this has never taken place, and it's almost like Sobia's reading from a script, and that Mustafa's in the background and she is just going through the motions of doing exactly what he wants her to say.
Sobia's brother, during that call, got really, really angry to the point where he just threw the phone and said, "I'm not having this conversation."
She was clearly saying this, again, under coercion from Mustafa. And this seems to be a pattern where he is using her to make accusations against her family, a further attempt to split her off from her family. And again, it's an expression of his sadistic, aggressive behaviour to make her even more isolated and under his power and control.
Mustafa's own family tell investigators about the morning they discovered Sobia was dead.
His mum said that she was terrified as to what Mustafa had done. He had come to her door and had asked her to come back to his house. She locked the door and did not want to go. His family members were telling her, "Do not go," which I think is very disturbing that that was going through their mind, and gives you an indication as to what they know this man is capable of.
But Mustafa persuades his mother to get in the car.
The mother goes to Pear Crescent and she's directed upstairs.
And so she went up to the bathroom, not really knowing what to expect.
And sees Sobia in the bath. She said to Sobia, "Why are you taking a bath at this time?"
She asks her if she's all right, and it's at that point that she realises she's not conscious.
And there was Sobia lying covered, head to foot in injuries.
And then she realised she was dead. Mustafa's mum confronted him and said, "Why have you killed her?" And he denied it. He claimed that she was just unconscious. She did not believe it. She knew what he had done. And she said, "You have killed her."
Atwell's mum breaks the news to his brother, who in turn calls the police. When interviewed by detectives, Mustafa's family reveal he could be hiding out at his uncle's house.
They tell police that it's an address that he may frequent. And that leads the police pretty quickly to go and visit that address. And they find Mustafa there, and they arrest him for murder.
In Normanton, Derbyshire, Atwell Mustafa has been arrested on suspicion of the murder of his newlywed wife, Sobia Khan. Police examine her husband's movements in the last 24 hours before his arrest.
So what the investigation discovered subsequently is that Mustafa, from his relative's house, has used a mobile phone to contact his solicitor. He's then discarded that mobile phone, which is perhaps an indication of his intent to evade capture.
And then he's bought flights to Pakistan, clearly with the intention of fleeing the country and escaping the jurisdiction in the hope that he can evade justice.
And he finally phoned an ambulance to try and get what he said was help. I believe this was a cynical and twisted ploy to try and avoid responsibility for what he had done and cover his tracks.
The good thing that we have at this point is the person that the police believe to be the perpetrator is in custody, so any ongoing risk to the public is mitigated. But they're also under a lot of pressure now, because there's only so long that you can keep somebody in custody and interview them and start to build your case.
Investigators uncover that Atwell Mustafa has a sinister history.
He was, in fact, a psychiatric patient currently under psychiatric care and supervision who had previously carried out a serious offence.
They would have found an incredibly horrific case from 2008. This would have rang massive alarm bells.
Mustafa holds an ex-partner captive in his home for 4 days.
She was assaulted, raped, her underwear was set on fire while she was wearing it.
He tortured her, he did some horrendous acts to her.
He completely abused this woman. He repeatedly beat her. He shaved off her hair, he shaved off her eyebrows.
He mutilated her. He caused a wide range of injuries to her that were truly horrific.
All of this was while he was accusing her of falsely having an affair. It was an absolutely horrific campaign of domestic abuse on a truly savage scale.
She finally managed to escape from him. She ran to a shop where the police were called and he was arrested. This sadistic assault, which included a sexual assault, bore striking similarities to the subsequent assault and murder of Sobia 9 years later.
Mustafa's arrested in 2008. The police investigation progresses and he goes to court charged with grievous bodily harm and rape as well. Mustafa pleads guilty to the grievous bodily harm.
He said that she had in fact provoked him and that he had been justified in attacking her.
But he denies the rape, so the case has to go to trial. And thankfully, he's subsequently convicted of those rapes. He's found guilty.
I spoke to his former partner and a support worker on her behalf on the day that he was sentenced. And it was clear, completely clear, that what he had done to her had devastated her life, had destroyed her, and had had a profound and disturbing impact on everything around her.
So again, during this investigation, there's the parallels between 2008 and 2017. You have this controlling, coercive behaviour where Mustafa is accusing his partner back in 2008 of being unfaithful, about having affairs. And this is the same behaviour that's then repeated in 2016, 2017 with Sobia. And this is a really worrying development when the police find this, because he's done this before.
And it seems at the time of his sentencing, Mustafa has a trick up his sleeve.
Following his conviction, Mustafa started to display psychiatric symptoms, none of which had been evident prior to the offences. He had no psychiatric history, but he managed to persuade psychiatrists that he was suffering from paranoid schizophrenia, as a result of which he was not sentenced to prison and he was admitted to a secure psychiatric hospital rather than being imprisoned. This meant that his care was now under the supervision of psychiatrists and he could be released after his mental illness, if he had one, had improved without any need to go back to prison.
At the secure unit in Nottinghamshire, Mustafa starts planning his path to freedom.
Quite early on, you start to see the seeds of what is manipulative behaviour there. You start to see that he's trying to ingratiate himself to staff, he's buying gifts, and he's mainly trying to portray this image of being a model patient.
He started to do some work on the farm shop there, and he felt that this was a way to try and sort of reintegrate into society and come across as a sort of normal, ordinary guy and actually hide his true nature.
And again, this is all about him trying to prove to the staff that he can be trusted, that he can go and interact with members of the community, and in actual fact, he presents no risk whatsoever.
Mustafa is moved to a lower security unit in Derby to start a sex offenders treatment programme, which was a requirement of his sentence.
He was moved nearer his home, where he manipulated the system again by suggesting that he had already carried out treatment programs which he had not done.
He was supposed to take a program for sex offenders. Somehow he managed not to do that. He hoodwinked the system and got out of it.
is probably 25 minutes walk from his home address on Pear Tree Crescent. So he's getting even closer to his home and he's managing to convince the people around him that he's no longer a risk.
His escorted leave, where he goes out with staff, is changed to unescorted, so he's allowed out on his own, ostensibly to go to Friday prayers. So again, he's manipulating the system. He's persuading staff to let him out unescorted because they believe that he's no longer showing any symptoms of illness, whereas in fact, he still remains a dangerous, psychopathic, personality disordered individual.
Atwell's unescorted leave is meant to be spent with his family, but left to his own devices at home, he has other plans.
He had formed a clandestine relationship with a member of staff who was there to look after him. This was strictly against the rules that he had been set because he was supposed to inform the authorities of any relationships that he was forming.
And it was following her disclosing to her employers that she'd had this relationship. She also identified his aggressive tendencies, his manipulative, his threatening behaviours.
With a healthcare professional, he tells her that her phone is bugged. He threatens violence. He seeks to control her. It's really coercive behaviour, and it's brought about by this jealousy that he seems to have.
It would have meant the end of her job, but such was her fear and the level of control that Mustafa had started to wield over her, she felt she had no choice but to come clean.
The healthcare assistant is fired for gross misconduct, and Mustafa spreads unfounded allegations of inappropriate behaviour with other patients.
But interestingly, again, what he was able to do is manipulate his position in that relationship to demonstrate that he was the victim.
These are massive parallels between what he had done with Sobia. It was just a pack of lies, and it was deceitful, and he was hiding the truth and using any way he could to do that.
Mustafa is discharged just months before meeting Sobia. In spite of an order to inform the authorities of any new relationships, he fails to do so. As detectives build their case against their suspect, they uncover more damning evidence.
As part of the police investigation, they found a recording on Mustafa's phone from the 18th of April.
The conversation was between Atwell, or Mustafa, and Sobia, and within that conversation, he was saying how she was stupid, she, wasn't intelligent, really belittling her.
He'd been incredibly nasty and abusive towards her intellect and her family, and this was an important piece of evidence.
The recording is dated just 4 days before their wedding.
This, I think, is a disturbing insight into what he is like as a person and shows the sort of control and dominance and violence that he later uses and was using at the time.
Investigators also uncover more worrying information in police records.
In October 2016, the police receive a safeguarding referral. And this referral is in relation to a young girl who fears that she will be victim of honour-based violence with respect to her uncle. And this uncle is Mustafa.
Detectives bring together all their findings on Mustafa.
The investigation team managed to get together a compelling case at this early stage. There is good witness evidence, there is good circumstantial evidence, and what they're able to do is convince the Crown Prosecution Service to charge Mustafa with murder.
Atwell Mustafa has been charged with the murder of his newly wedded wife, Sobia Khan, at their home in Normanton, Derbyshire.
So following his arrest and charge, Mustafa was remanded into HM Prison Nottingham, where he started to show very bizarre behaviour because he was trying to get himself transferred to a psychiatric hospital and he was trying to lay the groundwork for a psychiatric defence. He knew the system and he wanted to try and plead guilty to manslaughter on the grounds of diminished responsibility, claiming that he was mentally ill at the time, rather than be convicted of murder.
And a couple of months later, at his first court appearance, he pleaded not guilty to that murder.
Forensic psychiatrist Philip Joseph is asked to prepare a psychiatric report on Mustafa for the prosecution.
I was instructed by the Crown Prosecution Service to go and interview the defendant at the prison in order to determine whether there are any psychiatric factors which were implicated in the commission of the alleged offence. When I first met Mustafa, he told me that he hadn't expected a visit from me, although this had been organised with the prison authorities and his solicitor. And he then suggested that he remembered me from 2008, which was not correct, and may have been his attempt to give the impression that he was rather confused about the situation. He did, however, present as quite calm and cooperative, although later he appeared to be very distressed. For example, he was begging me to allow him to go to Sobia's funeral with what appeared to me not at all genuine distress. I felt very strongly that he was attempting to manipulate me as well and present himself as a mentally ill, harmless victim of the situation. When I interviewed him, he was at pains to suggest that Sobia was the one who was making the running in the relationship. She had suggested they get married, she had wanted him to meet her family, and she was totally in control of the relationship, and he was going along with it. Mustafa told me that in the period leading up to the killing, he was quite upset at Sobia's behaviour, the fact she was going online and talking to other men, that at times he didn't know whether he was taking his medication or not, sometimes he forgot, and he even suggested that Sobia had advised him to stop it, which is highly unlikely.
Mustafa also claims he suffered amnesia on the day of Sobia's murder.
So he told me he had no memory of killing her. But he does appear to remember things that put him in a better light. For example, that a man had come to the house whom he believed his wife was having an affair with, and also a memory of calling an ambulance. This selective memory also suggests that the amnesia is not genuine. I formed the opinion that he was a manipulative, dangerous, sadistic psychopath who was prone to excessive jealousy when in a possessive, controlling relationship with a woman. I was fairly confident that he was not mentally ill at the time of the killing, that he had never suffered from schizophrenia, and that he had no psychiatric defence to a charge of murder.
The trial finally begins against Atwell Mustafa. He continues to plead not guilty to Sobia's murder on the grounds of diminished responsibility.
The first day of the trial at Derby Crown Court was truly harrowing. The full scale of the abuse that Sobia had suffered was laid out at the prosecution opening of the trial. I vividly remember the victim's family attended court and had to listen to all of that harrowing detail. And it was truly shocking what had happened.
The jury's taken through the 30+ injuries and torture that Sobia suffered, including the burn marks meted out on her body with an iron.
My first thought was, this man is a monster. The way in which he carried himself, the way in which he conducted himself with real arrogance and an air of superiority over the whole process, which I've never come across since.
Mustafa's team mounts his defence.
Mustafa tried to present a case that he wasn't fully in control of what he did.
We weren't suggesting that he hadn't committed this atrocious crime. We were suggesting principally that he had a serious mental problem. But the doctor for the prosecution took the view that he was not suffering from an abnormality of mental function, which provided him with a defence.
The jury went out to deliberate, and just 15 minutes later, there was an announcement on the tannoy that they had come back with a verdict. That verdict was guilty.
Atwell Mustafa is jailed for life with a minimum of 33 years.
Mustafa laughed as he walked down to the cells. He'll be 69 before ever being considered for parole.
Sobia's brother, who asked not to show his face, gives his reaction to the sentence.
I'm supposed to protect my family. I wish I could have done something to stop it from happening. But he managed to play the system, he managed to dupe these people. I'd rather them learn from this, knowing that there's people out there that can manipulate and do what he's done to my sister.
A 6-week inquest later rules there were extensive failings by the authorities managing Mustafa.
I think the impact of the murder will remain and has remained with that community for many years to come. It's one of those shocking crimes that happened on an ordinary street in an ordinary city in Great Britain, but the ramifications have been huge.
Nobody heard anything from Sarah. She just completely vanished. And that's when the alarm bells really started ringing.
I couldn't sleep, I couldn't eat, because all I was thinking about was, where is my sister? What's happened to my sister? Is she okay?
Sarah hadn't been seen for a number of days, and this was investigated as a high-risk missing person.
I knew then that it was very serious and Sarah was either hurt or dead.
I received a phone call from the officers on the ground to say that they had located a body.
Not somewhere that people would have accidentally stumbled across this body. It was designed to be well hidden. They were the actions of somebody who knew exactly what they were doing.
On the banks of the River Erewash in Derbyshire lies the small town of Ilkeston.
Ilkeston's a mining community. Everyone knows everyone. So when you speak to people on the street, they are just perfectly friendly and they're quite happy to help.
Ilkeston has a very strong sense of belonging, and generation after generation of families stay in the area.
You've got nice woodland areas where you can go and have a walk. You've got like a hilltop thing where you can sit and you can look out over the fields, which is quite a nice view.
And the countryside's really accessible. In fact, like, I can just walk out my flat, go a few minutes, and I can be walking down the canal. It's a beautiful, beautiful area.
You go in a cafe, even if you don't know people in there, within seconds, you know, it's like you've known each other for years. You know, it's a lovely place.
And everybody helps one another, especially in times of need. I've always said there is nowhere else that I've ever been where the community spirit is like it is here.
Ilkeston is the town where 31-year-old Sarah Henshaw chose to raise her 2 children.
Sarah was a much-loved family member and friend within the community.
She was a full-time care assistant, going around the community, helping, looking after old people, yeah.
Everybody knew Sarah. She always helped people out whenever she had the chance, like helping neighbours in with their shopping. She always helped everybody out.
So when nobody has seen Sarah for a few days, her family start to feel uneasy.
I'd not seen her around. I normally see her go past in my car, or she would come to mine. I'd not seen her. I'd not heard from her.
My mum had rang me up to say, keep an eye out for Sarah. She'd rang around, she said she'd rang around everybody she could possibly think of who knew Sarah and where she would be. Nobody had no idea where Sarah was. And then I said, Mum, do you think it's serious? And she said, no, I think she's just gone away for a couple of days. But I said, Mum, Sarah wouldn't even do that. She wouldn't go without the girls.
Police were made aware that Sarah hadn't been seen for a number of days, and that was on Friday, the 23rd of June. And this was investigated as a high-risk missing person, and that was as a result of speaking to family members and friends and coming to the conclusion that this was completely out of character for Sarah to be incommunicado with people very close to her.
When Sarah's family realise that she has not taken her car, their fears escalate.
3 things she never, ever, ever goes out the house with ever: a kid, a phone and a car. She won't walk down the street only if her car's broke down or if it's got problems, or she'll be in a car. Anywhere she goes, she'll be in a car.
She'd been assaulted by somebody unknown to her a few years before, which caused her to drive everywhere in her car. She never went anywhere on foot, very rarely.
I said to my mum, Mum, something's not right here. It's not normal for Sarah to go without a car, to leave the keys, to leave the kids. I knew then that it was very serious and Sarah was either hurt or dead.
Police need to look into Sarah's life to see if anything can explain her disappearance.
It was a bit hectic and crazy growing up as a big family because there was 6 of us as siblings in a little house. Sarah always looked out for me. Sarah wanted me to grow up and be a young woman with respect. Sarah, that's one thing Sarah always said to me, is you need self-respect. And she always taught me to say my please and thank yous all the time, reminded me.
Sarah was the main one of the family, and they all looked up to her. And if their siblings needed anything, she'd be there straight away. If anyone upset members of her family, she'd tell them straight. She was a joker as well, like bubbly and joking. You don't know what to expect from her.
Laughing, was always laughing, always. Or she, you know, just the way she was. She was so caring, always there for everybody. And I just love laughing with her. She was just so funny, always telling jokes.
But yeah, she was just mad. Good mad, like, not bad mad, but yeah. We just was a bit nutty together, to be honest. She was good to me and I was good to her.
Sarah loved to have independence. That's all she did. She was a very independent, strong woman, and everybody knew her for that. She didn't like to be seen struggling. She didn't like to ask for help. She did it all by herself.
There was nothing significant that stood out regarding Sarah. Her main priority, quite obviously, were her 2 girls and her dog, and creating a home life that was happy and fun. She was clearly well-loved, friendly, vivacious young woman who had the whole of her life in front of her.
When we first found out Sarah was missing, family members were contacting all of her friends, anybody who could link to Sarah, who could have seen her, and nobody had. We all was just constantly ringing her phone, hoping she'd turn it on for 5 minutes and maybe reply to one of us, but calls were going to answer phone, messages were going, not sending. During the days Sarah was missing and the police were aware of it all and the investigation was ongoing, I couldn't sleep, I couldn't eat, because all I was thinking about was, where is my sister? What's happened to my sister? Is she okay?
As police inquiries continue, concern for Sarah's welfare grows.
What we noted was that Sarah was constantly messaging people, friends, family. So the fact that there was no phone usage was a huge red flag to the police. Nobody heard anything from Sarah. She just completely vanished. And that's when the alarm bells really started ringing. She was not caught on CCTV anywhere. CCTV covers a huge amount of space now. Ring doorbell footage. Her car was where it was, so how had she disappeared without being caught on any of those items of media?
There were real concerns for Sarah's safety. My main aim and focus was to find Sarah Henshaw. Police forced entry into her home address in an effort to find her. Clearly Sarah wasn't there, but there were signs in the kitchen that there possibly had been a clean-up. There was mop and bucket and bleach.
So I ran up to her house and there was a police officer there and I went, "Is Sarah there?" And he went, "No, she's not in the house." And I said, "Well, can I go in and check?" He goes, "We've already checked, she's not there." I goes, "Something's happened to her, it don't feel right." I says, "She's either hurt somewhere or she's lying somewhere really bad." I says, "I've got this feeling."
As search teams scour Sarah's house, they make another alarming discovery.
Sarah always wore a necklace with an elephant charm on it.
It was of great sentimental value to her, and we found it broken in different parts of the house. That raised the concerns for Sarah's well-being and whether we would actually find her alive.
In Ilkeston, Derbyshire, police have deemed 31-year-old Sarah Henshaw a high-risk missing person. In Sarah's home, search teams have found fragments of her broken necklace, along with signs of a clean-up.
So there were 23 exhibits seized from Sarah's home address, including mobile phones, laptops, clothing, but also some blue tarpaulin that we took possession of.
Tracing Sarah's last known movements, detectives make an unsettling discovery. The last time she was caught on CCTV was a full 3 days previously.
It became apparent that her last known sighting, last proof of life, was Tuesday the 20th of June, when she was seen on CCTV entering a local shop.
At 6:30, she purchased some groceries. She was fit, she was well, she didn't present us with any concerns when she was in the store.
Police released these images of Sarah on social media in an appeal to the public for information.
Then it had gone on to like Derbyshire Live, and then obviously people sharing it was just going more and more everywhere, you know, around the community.
I remember seeing the missing persons alert, and at that point it started to become clear that the police were getting concerned.
It became apparent during that investigation phase that there were witnesses. A neighbour heard a commotion coming from the property on the evening of the 20th of June.
At around 10 p.m, an argument can be heard coming from Sarah's bedroom, followed by a banging noise and then silence.
So my suspicions were raised and I was really concerned about Sarah's safety, and This was not just a missing persons inquiry, this was a murder investigation. And that was a result of witnesses who had heard chilling screams coming from Sarah's bedroom on that evening. This then became a no-body murder investigation.
When police speak to Sarah's neighbour Demi, she reveals she also heard noises from Sarah's house on the night of June 20th.
Like a banging on a radiator. It was do-do-do, and it was like, it was a weird sound, so it was either coming from her bedroom or the stairs, the landing. I'd messaged her and put, is everything okay? And as I hold the phone, as soon as it went to her phone, it had been read and replied saying, yes, everything okay? And I just texted back and put, okay, that's fine. I thought I could hear something.
A reply was sent from Sarah's phone to say that everything was okay, it was just the dog having a fit. The dog had been known to have fits. That was a condition that their dog had suffered with.
And I just thought it was the dog, so with the reply that I got off Sarah saying, yes, everything's okay, I've gone back to sleep.
Then in the early hours, Demi is again disturbed.
I heard something else, so I've looked out of my window and Darren was standing at his van, but he had both of the back doors open. Then he shut the doors and walked in, and then that was it.
As Sarah's former partner, Darren Hall is still a regular visitor, so Demi thinks little more of it until the following morning.
Sarah's friend knocked on Sarah's house, no answer. And she said, oh, have you seen Sarah? And I says, no, I haven't seen her since the night before. Messaged Darren and I asked him, have you seen Sarah? And he said, the reply that I got is, no, I don't know where she's gone. She's went out early hours. And I says, all right, so do you know where she is? She hasn't taken her car. And he said, no, don't know anything. I'll try and let you know later.
Later that day, Darren tells Demi that he's worried about Sarah and that some of her belongings are missing.
He said, have you been in all day? I said, I have. And he said, do you know if anybody's been in the house? And I said, no. And he said, somebody's been in the house and opened her drawers, taken clothes out, but then she had like a butterfly bag. She loved butterflies, and put, clothes inside this bag, gone out the house and taken it. And I said, no, I've not seen anybody.
As police continue to trace Sarah's movements in the hours before she was last caught on CCTV, it becomes apparent that she had spent much of the previous day with a friend.
So Sarah, on that Tuesday, had been out with her best friend all day. And had come back in the evening, went to the shop, picked up some items for tea, went back to find that Darren had let himself in with a key that he still had. We now know that Sarah wasn't happy about it and had asked him to return it. We know that the atmosphere was frosty, that Sarah didn't want him there.
There'd been a build-up throughout the day. Sarah was saying to him in no uncertain terms that she didn't want him in her life anymore. She didn't want him at the house. She wanted him to leave his key. We know that throughout that evening, that Darren was refusing to go. He wasn't accepting, but she didn't want him to be there.
Sarah's best friend said that her and Darren had an argument at the dinner table. It was very chaotic. Darren upsetting Sarah, and obviously Sarah saying, please just get out of my house, I need some time to myself. And she said she knew Sarah was uncomfortable in her own house because Darren was there and wouldn't leave.
We know from CCTV inquiries on Sarah Street that she left her home address to take a friend home. Sarah dropped her friend off and returned back to her home address a couple of minutes later. So Sarah would have been back at her home address just before 10 p.m, 20th of June.
Police inquiries reveal that Darren was still at the house when Sarah returned.
At 22:02 hours, we know that there's a message exchange between Sarah and the best friend. And then Sarah sends a final message from her phone at 10:09, which a friend responds to at 10:37. And that's a message that Sarah would have replied back to. A friend is asking if she's okay. But after that message, there's no contact from Sarah.
It appears that Darren Hall may have been the last person to see Sarah Henshaw alive.
No other persons were coming into the frame as to being responsible for her disappearance other than her ex-partner, who was in the house at that time.
At this point, I'm placing you under arrest for murder. You don't have to say anything, but it may harm your body. It's not anything. Later on in court, and anything you do say might be giving evidence. The reason that you've been arrested, the necessity is so we can do a prompt and effective investigation, and so we don't have any loss of evidence, OK? It's on suspicion of murder at the moment.
Mum of two, Sarah Henshaw, is missing, presumed dead. Her ex-partner, Darren Hall, is believed to be the last person to have seen her alive, and despite police finding no body, he has been arrested on suspicion of her murder.
Sarah's always happy, no matter what, even if things were on her mind, she always stayed happy. She managed to make everybody laugh. Even on our bad days, we'd laugh. We could not stop laughing.
Was he surprised?
Go on then.
Just to make sure that I get myself.
Sarah would do anything for her friends. A very genuine, kind, loving person, and that's not something what can be put on. That is who Sarah was.
She never went out. She preferred staying in and having cuddles and playing pranks on each other. Her home was her safe space.
Police interviewed Darren. They took his phone from him at that point. He maintained in his interview that they'd had an argument and that Sarah had left him.
Darren maintained that he was not responsible for Sarah going missing, that he didn't know where she was, that she had done this before, that she had gone off and left the family home.
Detectives questioned Darren as to why he was in the driveway of Sarah's house in the early hours of the morning on the night they believe she was killed.
Darren was giving a very convoluted story about the events of that night and the reasons why he left the home in the early hours, citing that the dog had had a fit and messed on a duvet, and he was having to leave the address in the early hours to dispose of this duvet. And I was acutely aware of how hot it was that June and how desperately I wanted to find Sarah for her family. So we were imploring Darren to tell us where she was. Just tell us where she was. And he was quite callous. At one point said to us that it was our job to find her.
Police start to find inconsistencies in Darren's account of that night.
We know Sarah didn't leave the home address, as he stated, due to the CCTV trawls that we were doing. And also it would have been very out of character to walk out of her home address. It's just something she never did, particularly in the middle of the night.
Convinced that Darren knows details of Sarah's whereabouts, police fast-track analysis of the phone they seized on his arrest.
So we know Darren Hall's mobile phone was connected to Sarah's home address in the early hours of the 21st of June and disconnected from her home address at 10 to 2 approximately, and then connected up with his Ford Transit van that was parked outside. So following on from that, we then plotted his route using GPS data ANPR CCTV and where he had gone in the early hours. We know his route, leaving Ilkeston, joining the M1 at junction 29, and we know that his vehicle became stationary at a lay-by on the A617.
And we know that it was in that lay-by for a total of 9 minutes. And we can say that because Darren Hall's phone was tracked on the same satellite which covered the lay-by for the 9 minutes he was there.
We also know during that time that the torchlight on his phone was turned on and off at intervals.
So every time you turn it on and off, it stamps it, leaves a date and a time as to each activation. We was also able to look at the apps that he'd viewed, the downloads on his mobile phone. The health app was very important because it showed that he was taking hundreds of steps in the early hours of the 21st, which is out of character. The normal activity for Darren between midnight and 6 in the morning is that there's no activity at all. Yet on this particular morning, he's done 266 steps. We were confident that Darren was in the lay-by, so we sent a specialist uniformed task force, a search team down to that lay-by.
And it was some 10 minutes later that I received a phone call from the officers on the ground to say that they had located a body some 10 metres from the lay-by.
The lay-by was heavily overgrown, dense, wooded area. You wouldn't have been able to see the body unless you actually walked into the woods. We only found the body through the location data on Darren's mobile phone.
Upon searching the deposition area, we found small snags of blue tarpaulin on the bramble bushes that were seized and found to match the blue tarpaulin within Sarah's home address. It was quite quickly became apparent that this was the body of Sarah Henshaw.
The Monday they came and told me that they found her. I still sat there thinking she's going to come back.
The first thing I said after my mum said that she was dead was, where is she? Where was she found? And my mum said that he had just dumped her in a lay-by. Sorry. Oh, damn. I'm gonna do it, I just gotta, hang on, sorry, it's because this is the first time I've ever spoken about it. All I wanted was my big sister. I just wanted my big sister to come back and say, I'm okay now, it's fine, stop stressing. And then to get told a week later of the news that I'm never going to get to see her again broke me.
Police tell Darren Hall they have found Sarah's body.
We located Sarah's body just after midnight on Monday, the 26th of June, and the next interview, we told him that we had found her body and where. From that point on, he remained silent.
He completely changed. He closed down, wouldn't answer any further questions, wouldn't make eye contact, wouldn't engage with the officers at all, just sat there in silence.
8 days after Sarah Henshaw's death, Darren Hall is charged with her murder.
He maintained that he had no idea where Sarah was or what had happened to her. And when he was confronted with the evidence after they'd found her body, that's when he had no answers.
With so many questions left unanswered, Sarah's mum seeks guidance from a medium.
And she was sending messages that she kept doing this, he said. Kept doing that round her neck. And that she was wrapped in something She passed a message on to me saying, you deal with the court, get justice.
Then, as the court date approaches, Darren Hall breaks his silence.
Darren Hall admitted that he had disposed of Sarah's body. Darren's defence was that Sarah had fallen down the stairs and he had panicked.
What Darren didn't admit is that he was the one who'd killed Sarah.
The body of Sarah Henshaw has been found near a lay-by in Derbyshire. Her ex-partner, Darren Hall, has admitted to concealing her body, but denies her murder.
He just treated her like a bag of rubbish. No, you wouldn't even treat an animal like that. He didn't love her if he was going to do that.
And there were probably around a dozen friends and family members in the court, and they were deeply distressed.
I was nervy, but I sat there and I was so strong. And all my family were there and they were strong.
The courtroom was charged with energy. When Darren was led into the dock,
I just sat looking at him. Thought, you ain't getting the better of me. I'm more stronger than you, mate. And I sat there looking at him.
But Darren Hall cuts a forlorn figure in the dock.
He looked utterly petrified. I didn't know really whether he'd be able to give evidence. He looked that nervous and that distressed.
And it was apparent, looking at Darren, he appeared to be putting on some act, to me, of a dishevelled, nervous wreck of a man who was being wrongly convicted.
You've got to be quite careful in that situation because you don't want the jury to feel sympathy for somebody. You want to demonstrate what a cold, calculating person he had been.
The defence lay out their case that Sarah had fallen down the stairs in a fatal accident.
He said it happened in a split second. He said he looked at the bottom of the stairs and she was dead. He panicked, didn't want anyone to find out about it and accuse him of murder.
He actually describes Sarah as the one who was pushing him across the landing. If your loved one had fallen down the stairs, the first thing what he'd do is call for an ambulance. And if you can save that person's life, you would do everything in your powers to do that. But Darren didn't do that. If we go back to Darren's interviews, he never mentioned that Sarah had fallen down the stairs. His story is that they'd had an argument and she'd gone to stay at a friend's house. If there was any other innocent explanation, then you would tell the police what had happened. But Darren didn't do that because he couldn't, because there wasn't an innocent explanation for what he'd done. He very coldly murdered her.
But there is a gaping hole in the prosecution's case.
What we didn't have was an eyewitness as to what actually took place. We had people who heard things. One witness heard a scream, another heard banging.
The prosecution offer up a theory as to Darren's motive for killing Sarah.
Sarah was going to expose Darren on social media about an affair that she believed that he had had. Those messages would have been present on Sarah's phone, so he needed to get rid of that phone because it gives a motive for him to kill her.
Police believe that Darren Hall disposed of Sarah's phone the day after he left her body in the lay-by.
On his return to Ilkeston, we know he pulled into a lake. He stops and his phone disconnects from his van for 30 seconds. He then gets back in his van and continues home. My thoughts are, why, on your way home, would you stop at a leak for just 30 seconds. My belief was that this is where he threw Sarah's phone. That leak was searched tirelessly by dive officers, but Sarah's phone was never found.
The prosecution revealed disturbing details of Darren and Sarah's relationship.
So Darren and Sarah had been together for approximately 12, 13 years, a very volatile on-off relationship.
If Sarah was going through a bad time with anything, he had no sympathy. He didn't show that, and he didn't show no love, none whatsoever.
It was little petty arguments at first, but the voices would get louder and louder, and then it wouldn't be a petty argument anymore. It would be over the silliest thing. Maybe she's nipped to the shop and she's been longer than what she thought she'd be, and then it'd be questions after questions. And she said, "I feel like I'm stepping on eggshells around you, Darren." And she had bruises on her arms and on her face. And I said, "Sarah, how did you get them?" And she said, "Oh, I fell down the stairs." But I knew that straight away you can't just get marks and a black eye from falling down the stairs. And later on, my mum had told me it was from Darren.
He hurt her when she was pregnant. He pushed her. And obviously Sarah said, "Don't say it, Mum." I warned her to ring someone then, but she wouldn't. She just said, "I love him, Mum, and I want to be with him." And I says, "If that's what you want, I can't stop you."
But this evidence is entirely circumstantial.
We're aware there were incidents of domestic abuse, however, none of which, unfortunately, being reported to the police.
And Darren is visibly distraught, claiming that he adored Sarah.
And his case was that their relationship was brilliant at the beginning. It had its difficulties, but he really wanted to make it work.
The analysis of both Darren and Sarah's phone data that is laid out for the jury reveals some disturbing evidence.
Messages were sent in response to her friends questioning her about, is she okay, because of the lack of contact.
The texts from Sarah Henshaw's phone were then matched, of course, time-wise, with when Darren Hall dumped her body in the lay-by.
We now know that that would be Darren Hall re-messaging those friends back, purporting to be Sarah. We believe at that time that Sarah was dead.
And I think most upsettingly, but crucially, he had been sending a number of messages to Sarah's phone, effectively saying, "Where are you? I miss you. Please come home."
The fact that he was sending messages from his phone to Sarah's phone, it was a very considered and convoluted way of disguising the fact that he had killed her.
And there is further incriminating evidence obtained from Darren Hall's phone when police look at searches he has made in the days following Sarah's death.
Darren makes 2 Google searches. The first one looking into police procedures for missing persons, and the second one is, can deleted messages be recovered from an iPhone? We know that Darren searches how to change over child tax benefit. It just shows something very sinister, don't it?
Phone data reveals that despite his story to neighbour Demi, it was not Sarah that had taken a bag of her belongings, but Darren Hall himself.
I think the most shocking part of the trial was the fact that he had gone back to the family home and snuck in to pack this bag to then further perpetuate the lie that Sarah had left her family. To think about that, to think about doing that, showed a man who knew exactly what he was doing and was doing everything in his power to avoid being caught.
He removed a number of items of clothing and packed them in a butterfly duffel bag that belonged to Sarah. We then know that Darren left service after 10 minutes. And from his phone location data, we know that he went directly to Ilkeston Skip. He drives around to where the clothing bank is, parks up, and he removes 2 black bags from his van and disposes of them into the clothing bank.
And it became apparent that Darren had got rid of evidence that may have implicated him in the disappearance of Sarah.
Unfortunately, by the time the police discovered the CCTV of that, the recycling bin had been emptied, and so we were never able to show what had been disposed of.
However, we continued on with his movements of that day. Later that day, he'd also visited a recycling centre in Nottingham with his work colleague. He'd distracted his work colleague to empty the back of the van whilst he went to the side of the van and took out 2 white plastic bags. That skip was seized, and specialist search teams conducted a meticulous search through the items of that skip.
There was a box with Darren's address on it, which enabled us to link that bag to Darren. And then underneath that box, Sarah's dressing gown cord and the slippers.
And that enabled us to put forward the case theory that actually he had strangled her using the dressing gown cord. The question we put before the jury was, why would he get rid of that dressing gown? What was so significant about it that he felt the need to dispose of it? And he hadn't done this on just one day. He'd done this over the course of 2 or 3 days. And that was crucial because it showed that this wasn't a man who was panicking. Actually, it showed that he was thinking about his actions and very carefully disposing of items in different, separate locations in an effort to thwart the police investigation.
But Sarah's post-mortem does not corroborate the theory that she was strangled.
Sarah's body, it had begun to decompose. So the normal types of injuries that we look for and what we thought was a strangulation case would be bruising around the neck. And we couldn't see that because the skin was so discoloured.
Darren maintains that Sarah's death was as a result of her falling downstairs.
There were no bony injuries, so no bruises or abrasions on parts of the body that, if you'd fallen down the stairs, that's where you would expect there to be injuries. We were able to show that, or the lack of injury showed that that was not consistent with his account. Put that together with the screams that were heard, and we said that ultimately he had murdered her.
But the defence are quick to point out that Sarah's cause of death is unknown.
2 doctors that I saw give evidence both said we can't conclude definitively how this person died because of the state of decomposition.
With all the evidence now presented, it is a nervous wait for the jury's decision.
There was the concern that Darren Hall was going to wriggle out of this and the jury would accept his explanation.
There's always an element of risk with any trial, particularly in this case when we couldn't definitively say how Sarah had died.
Having deliberated for just 3 hours, the jury returns.
There's a lot of trepidation in anticipation for what that verdict is going to be. The stress is palpable, and you could hear a pin drop when the verdict is heard. Guilty. The verdict was unanimous decision of guilty for murder.
We all screamed yes so loud, and we all looked at Darren, and Darren's face just went down and he just did that.
My body just drained, all the drain feeling. And I went up to the prosecution barrister and gave her a hug and said thank you.
The sentence was life. The minimum term was 17 years. Now that means that Darren Hall will have to serve at least 17 years before he's considered eligible for parole.
Darren Hall is manipulative, deceiving, and a violent individual. So as a result of his continued lies and deceitful way in which he disposed of Sarah's body, he robbed her family of having the opportunity to say goodbye to her.
None of us was able to see Sarah, as they said, because of the heat and the amount of time she was out in the lay-by for, her body had decomposed in some areas.
There's a part of me what's gone, so my heart, a part of my heart's ripped out.
We have got the life sentence. We're never going to sit and have a cup of tea with Sarah ever again. I'm never going to get to see my big sister ever again.
Please be aware that this programme contains themes of domestic violence.
The police received a call. Dawn Walker had gone missing. She had never gone missing before. This was an extraordinary absence.
And neighbours told of hearing screams and banging. Dawn had seemed scared of something. She told her daughter, "I feel like something bad is going to happen to me."
He was an inveterate liar. Everything was a fabrication. And the whole picture became clear. He was somebody who was totally intent on protecting himself.
The truth was actually worse. It was chilling.
Three miles east of Halifax in West Yorkshire lies the charming village of Lightcliffe.
It's a nice, close-knit community. It's friendly. Everyone knows their neighbours. It's quite residential, family-orientated.
So I've lived in Lightcliffe for around 4 or 5 years, and my wife's lived here all her life. It's just a very nice feel, close to everywhere you want to be, near to Leeds, near Huddersfield. It's just got everything that you want. So I'd say it's very much a place where people would move to, so it's definitely a sought-after place to want to live, yeah. It's very much a place where, you know, if you're walking down the road and you see someone even in the car or walking, you say hello and you even stop and have a natter with them.
It is Lightcliffe where Dawn Walker and Thomas Nutt decide to settle down together.
Dawn and Thomas met in 2019 and formed a very strong relationship. Dawn Walker, aged 52, is the mother of 3 children. He was a little bit younger than she was. Thomas, aged 45, was a scrap metal dealer, very friendly chap when he dealt with persons in the street or neighbours or anything of that nature. He was one of the boys, we'll say.
I understand that he and Dawn had met through Facebook.
They moved in together and were living in the current house for about 2 years. They had a pretty stable, happy-go-lucky relationship, and they were going to be married.
Thomas and Dawn had been together for 3 years, and then they married on the 27th of October.
Dawn and Thomas got married in Brigg House, and they had a party in the local pub that evening. And in fact, it was a happy affair with about 20 people present.
And they were in good spirits. They had planned the next day to go to Skegness.
There was a plan to go on honeymoon after the marriage, and the arrangement was they would go in the caravan, which Thomas owned. Day after the couple went on their honeymoon, the daughters of Dawn received messages from her about what was going on, that they were having a good time.
Dawn mentions to her daughter that she'd like to get together when she gets back from her honeymoon.
Arrangements were made for her to meet her when they returned home and to go shopping together in Wilco's in Brigg House.
Despite Dawn's cheery message to her daughters, Thomas divulges that he and his new bride had had a difference of opinion.
During the honeymoon, Thomas messaged a neighbour saying that him and Dawn had a disagreement about when to return home. He claimed he wanted to return home for Halloween for her grandson, and she was not happy, and he also texted a neighbour to say that he had to please the wife.
After their 4-day honeymoon, the couple arrived back in Lightcliffe on the morning of the 31st of October.
It was on Halloween morning that Thomas was in his garden putting up Halloween decorations, which even included police tape.
Thomas is going to town on the Halloween decorations when a neighbour asks after Dawn.
It was then that Thomas told the neighbour that Dawn had not turned up to meet her daughter in Brigg House.
Dawn was due to meet up with one of her daughters and her grandson, and she didn't turn up. And this was highly unusual for her because she loved her grandson and she loved her daughter.
The neighbour had joked, "Where have you buried her, Tomo?" And Thomas began to cry and became emotional at the question, despite it clearly being a joke.
Thomas then admits that despite having just returned from a happy honeymoon, Dawn had left the house a few hours earlier, and he'd not seen her since, prompting the neighbour to rally the community.
A search was put in hand as a result of the concerns over Dawn's absence, and this was done by neighbours and friends of Thomas.
When the search fails to locate Dawn, Thomas alerts the police to her uncharacteristic disappearance.
The police received a call from Thomas Nutt at 12:30, reporting his newly wedded wife, Dawn Walker, had gone missing from the family home. So police received that report and assessed it as high risk.
4 days after the wedding, Dawn was declared missing.
Despite the fact that Dawn has only been reported missing for a few hours, police are concerned for her safety and try to determine if there's an explanation for her absence.
Dawn was a mother of 3 and a grandmother of 1.
We know from the information from her daughters that she was a very kind, selfless person and was only 5 foot tall and very slight build. And she was a mother, she was a sister, she was an aunt, and she was a friend. She would do anything for anyone.
With fears for Dawn's well-being growing, a police officer is sent to Dawn and Thomas's home.
The officer went round on the 31st of October. We know that they expedited to the address to get as much information as possible.
Despite having arranged to speak with Thomas, when the officer arrives, there appears to be nobody home. Then a few minutes later, Thomas appears.
Thomas Nutt told the officer that he'd actually been to the shop. The police officer noted that Thomas Nutt was sweating at the time.
Thomas explains he'd nipped out and, realising the time, had rushed home to meet the police officer.
And that was one of the reasons why Thomas said he was sweating, because he was running. When the police officer carried out the initial inquiry with Thomas Nutt, he spent over an hour with him. Thomas told the police officer that his wife, Dawn, was a little bit agitated because of her mental condition.
A concerned Thomas discloses to the police officer that he believes that Dawn had been failing to take her medication.
He was concerned because he said that Dawn suffered from bipolar and depression.
When the police officer leaves, Thomas calls upon a neighbour to help him resume the search for Dawn. They go to a graveyard where the couple would often walk.
He had taken a neighbour with him to look for Dawn at a cemetery, and he said he was glad that he had taken this neighbour with him in case people thought he had killed Dawn.
Meanwhile, friends and neighbours continue to search for Dawn closer to home and come across an unexpected discovery.
They went and looked in fields and bushes behind the property, and they found a suitcase in the bushes close by to the back of Thomas and Dawn's home.
Woman saw the suitcase in the area that had been left. It was her partner that had gone looking for Dawn with Thomas, and upon their return, she let him know of her concerns. And that's when he went and discovered the body in the suitcase.
And the body was identified as that of Dawn.
Lightcliffe, West Yorkshire. 4 days after her wedding to Thomas Nutt, locals have been searching for his missing bride, Dawn Walker.
And the search ended with the discovery of a suitcase in the bushes, and that suitcase contained a body. And the body was eventually identified as that of Dawn.
Halloween, I mean, at first you think it's a joke, and then the more people talk about it, and then when it did come about that, you know, there was a body there, that's when you just think, wow, it's really serious sort of stuff, you know?
This was clearly not a missing persons case. It was a murder investigation. And the police set about dealing with it as best they could, as quickly as they could.
Detectives scrutinised Dawn's movements in the days leading up to her disappearance. Since Dawn and Thomas had been out of town on honeymoon, neighbours report last seeing Dawn at her wedding reception.
Dawn and Tommy left the party at 10:20 or thereabouts, picked up by a taxi and taken home. It took 6 minutes to get back to their home. And they alighted from the taxi and went into the house. The police contacted the taxi driver after the event, and he confirmed that there appeared to be a happy atmosphere in the taxi after he picked them up. Obviously they had been drinking, but there seemed to be a good, happy relationship.
We know Dawn arrived back home on their wedding night. She was spotted on CCTV. It was just after midnight that Thomas Nutt was seen leaving the house again.
He was seen actually going to a cash point, and as he went up to the cash point, he pulled up his hoodie so he couldn't actually be seen facially, and he drew out £200 cash from that cash point. That was drawn out on Dawn's card.
At 1 a.m, he was spotted in the family's back garden, and then at 5:30 a.m, he was observed by a neighbour having a cigarette on the back step as well.
As police look more closely at Dawn's new husband, a worrying picture starts to emerge.
Thomas Nutt had been violent towards a previous partner who he'd become controlling with, not letting her leave the house. In July 2020, Dawn had actually messaged ex-partner of Thomas Nutt's to find out why she had a restraining order put in against him. Nutt had claimed that it was because the woman had cheated on him, but the truth was actually very horrific. The relationship Thomas Nutt had with the woman was marred by violence.
So this is an individual who is using their physique and their physical dominance to dominate and impose their will by means of verbal abuse and physical abuse.
She actually made Dawn aware of Thomas's behaviour patterns, and she actually had a Facebook dialogue with Dawn, trying to warn her about Thomas's conduct and behaviour. Notwithstanding that, Dawn did stick with the man she loved.
The woman then received a message from Dawn in August 21. Dawn said that Nutt had tried to kill her and had bruised her face and tried to suffocate her, but panicked when he saw all the blood.
Dawn's friends and family paint a sinister picture of her new husband, Thomas Nutt.
By all reports, they had a relationship which was abusive. Family members will say that he was controlling. We know that the family were isolated from Dawn, and that Nut led Dawn to believe that he was the only person that she needed, her protector, her husband, and that she did not need any other relationships. That is completely the modus operandi of a domestic violence perpetrator.
As a result of the investigations made by the police, it became clear that Thomas Nutt was a very possessive man, and he was very, very jealous of Dawn, and he controlled her. He was coercive in his general behaviour towards her. He wanted his own way, and if he didn't get it, it would seem he would resort to violence.
They've had previous domestic history in the past. One neighbour says they heard Tomo get off me.
And neighbours told of hearing screams and banging before.
One of the neighbours went to the house and banged on the door because he could hear screaming that he'd never heard from a lady before. That level of screaming. And Thomas answered the door and said, "Oh, she's not well. Hasn't taken her pills again."
A neighbour had walked into the house and discovered Nut assaulting Dawn, and she'd complained that he was going to kill her. Dawn was seen in 2020 with having injuries, including a black eye, and it's understood in the days up to her wedding, she also messaged a neighbour asking if she should get the hell out of there. On her wedding day, Dawn had even been seen by her daughter shaking and looked to be unhappy. She told her, "I feel like something bad is going to happen." On what was supposed to be her happiest day of her life, Dawn seemed scared of something. Her daughter told her that she was just being paranoid, but she again repeated, "I feel something bad is going to happen to me." The two then left things as they were and continued to prepare for the day.
Police systems tell us that there has been reports of domestic violence. Only 12 months ago, Dawn Walker took the courageous step in reporting Nut for domestic abuse towards her. We know that this led to the police and Crown Prosecution Service not only charging Nut, but also remanding Nut. Usually when somebody is remanded in custody, they pose a threat to other people. So that was a real courageous step that Dawn took, and she wouldn't have taken it lightly, but she suffered months and months of abuse prior to that.
Dawn reported Thomas to the police because he beat her up. And she was badly injured facially, and she alleged that he treated her badly sexually.
We know Dawn urged police to drop the charges because Dawn did not want to prosecute, and there wasn't enough independent evidence. The case was discontinued. But we don't know if there was any contact between Nut and Dawn during the period he was incarcerated. But we do know she felt compelled to withdraw those charges.
Eventually, when he was released, he then moved in back with her, and she continued to happily or unhappily live with him.
Because Dawn was in a controlling and coercive relationship, he was then able to wiggle his way into the house and the home and her heart again.
In an unexpected turn of events, detectives are contacted by Thomas Nutt's brief.
It's during this time that officers received a call from a solicitor who had said that a man called Thomas Nutt was going to hand himself into the police station.
He handed himself in to police at Halifax Police Station on the afternoon of the 31st of October, having previously, only hours earlier, reported Dawn missing.
Thomas decided, with some reluctance it would seem, to go to the police station and to give an account of what had happened.
Police are investigating the murder of 52-year-old Dawn Walker. They have discovered that her new husband, Thomas Nutt, has a history of domestic abuse. In a surprise move, he has handed himself in to police, keen to give his account of how events unfolded when they returned from their honeymoon.
Nutt claimed that the couple had got back from Skegness after 2 days away, and that Dawn had said that she'd wanted a divorce and was going to report him for rape and assault.
He's saying that she threatened to report him again to police, which then caused him to react.
Thomas said that Dawn attacked him and he had to defend himself from her, and he struck out to defend himself and also to stop her screaming and making threats, etc. Thomas said that he did not intend to cause any harm, but Dawn became aggressive, and that she attacked him, scratched his face with her long nails.
Nutt claimed that he then hit Dawn in the face and put his arm around her neck, and she went limp. He claimed her death was accidental.
He did admit that he had been involved in violence upon Dawn and was responsible for her death, but it wasn't intentional. It was, as he suggested, accidental. That's what he was pushing forward to the police. And in fact, he did, in his explanation, try and get that over by saying and it all happened so quickly and so suddenly, he didn't realise that she was dead until she collapsed.
Thomas Nutt may be claiming his wife's death was accidental, but detectives take a different view.
When Nutt has handed himself into police, he's said that he has killed his wife. He's then arrested for murder.
And there was a lot of talk around the community of, you know, this murder had taken place and how horrific it was. So it was just like quite intriguing at that point as to, you know, what had actually happened.
The family of a woman who was found dead in Halifax on Sunday have paid tribute to her. The body of 52-year-old Dawn Walker was found near Aysgarth Avenue in Lightcliffe. Police have arrested a 45-year-old man and he remains in custody.
And ultimately, when he's interviewed by police, it's a deck of cards then that has fallen down, because once the police have found the body, and the body is obviously met an unnatural death, he becomes a suspect by way of him being the last person that he's seen to see her alive, but also because of the domestic violence history. And he knows that, which has probably led him to go to the police and try and get his point of view forward to the police, even though he's admitted killing her.
Thomas Nutt is charged with the murder of his wife, Dawn Walker. But Nutt remains resolute in his account of her death being unintentional.
He says that it was manslaughter and he didn't mean to kill her.
He'd pleaded not guilty and a trial date was set.
Thomas admitted manslaughter, that he didn't intend to cause her serious bodily harm, and that although he used force upon her, there was no intent to kill. And that was why the prosecution quite properly said, no, we're not prepared to accept that plea to manslaughter, but went ahead with a trial on the charge of murder. Thomas maintained that he only reacted to Dawn when she lost her temper, she attacked him, and he had to restrain her. And that is why he was prepared to maintain a plea to manslaughter.
Nutt's defence that Dawn was attacking him is immediately put under doubt when he walks into the courtroom.
Nut is an imposing physical person, and we know that Dawn was only 5 foot tall and very slight build. So this is an individual who enjoys and likes to impose his dominance over women. And he was never going to argue that she overpowered him or she threatened him because of the difference in stature. He says that he didn't mean to kill her, but he would say that the size of the man to cause physical injury to her and then to apply such pressure on her throat to kill her, that there would be an intent to murder.
Nut's attitude in the dock does little to endear him to the jury.
During the trial, Nut seemed disinterested, which, given the gravity and detail of the horrific crime, is disgraceful.
He appeared cool, calm and collected, and you think, how can a person do this? Appear in the dock, know they're facing a life sentence, and just act so nonchalant about it.
The prosecution revealed to the jury what they claimed to be Nut's web of lies, starting with the honeymoon to Skegness.
Because his story was that they'd gone off for the honeymoon in the caravan and they'd spent a couple of nights in the lay-by where they had a good time watching DVDs and things like that. The police obviously took very thorough steps to investigate everything that Thomas said. And one of the things that raised a big question mark was whether Dawn had actually gone to Skegness.
The morning after the wedding, Thomas had been outside the house when a passerby stopped to chat.
A neighbour asked about Dawn because Thomas was up quite early, and he said, oh, she's in bed with a hangover. She's had too much to drink last night.
But the prosecution suggests that Dawn Walker was not a big drinker and had consumed little alcohol at her wedding reception the previous night.
Neighbours had noticed things in the family home and the area that weren't quite right in terms of the curtains remaining closed at the house, washing remaining on the line. Dawn would always leave the curtains open or take the washing in before they went out.
The evidence from neighbours was that Dawn was the early wake-up person. She got up early, she got up and did things around the house. But on that occasion, she didn't.
The prosecution highlight a further anomaly on the return from the honeymoon.
When Thomas Nutt got back, acquiring the assistance of a neighbour to help him park up the caravan, which was an activity that Dawn would usually do. Even before Thomas Nutt had reported a missing, neighbours and noted things that weren't quite right.
The jury hears how police had scrutinised ANPR cameras along the route the couple would have taken to Skegness.
The CCTV showed that when he left the house, Thomas was clearly in view. There was no sign of Dawn. She wasn't in the passenger seat, and he actually put things on that seat, and she wasn't anywhere to be seen. And on the trip down to Skegness, various cameras, CCTV cameras, showed there was nobody in the passenger seat. So the police did a thorough investigation of CCTV down to Skegness, and every bit of evidence from CCTV showed that Dawn was not in the car. So she wasn't visible on the way down to Skegness, and on the return journey from Skegness, there were other camera shots, CCTV shots, which also showed no Dawn.
Despite Nutt's defence that Dawn's death was an accident, when they returned home from their honeymoon on the 31st of October, the evidence dictates otherwise.
The last person to see Dawn was her maid of honour, after the wedding celebration in the pub, and eventually the taxi driver. And beyond that, the only person who claimed to have seen Dawn was Thomas Nutt. Everything about her going to Skegness and things that would supposedly happened were untrue. Dawn had not gone to Skegness. He killed her on the night of the wedding.
Thomas Nutt is standing trial, accused of the murder of his new wife, Dawn Walker. The prosecution are claiming that he killed her on their wedding night.
We know Dawn was last seen on CCTV of showing her and Thomas Nutt arriving home after their wedding. This was just after midnight, and she could be seen on the CCTV getting out of a taxi and arriving home. So we knew she'd arrived home, but she was not seen again after that.
But Thomas Nutt maintains that he and Dawn enjoyed their honeymoon together, and that while away, Dawn was even messaging her daughters.
There's an expectation that he goes on honeymoon, and there's also an expectation that she will want to speak to family and friends. We know that when he was in the caravan, that he communicated purporting to be Dawn to a daughter. Again, all knowing that he had already killed her mother. We know that on the 30th of October, he again, purporting to be Dawn, messaged and contacted the daughter, asking to meet up in Brighouse the following day. Again, keeping that pretense up that she's alive.
Thomas Nutt has said he'd killed Dawn on the 30th, but she had not actually been seen since the night of her wedding. He probably said that he'd killed her on the 30th because it was less time, and also he's not been preventing a lawful burial for as long as he would have been had he fessed up to killing her on the 27th.
Having killed her on the night of the wedding, Nutt goes ahead with their planned 3-day honeymoon to Skegness.
Because it's a spontaneous act, he's now thinking, what do I do? And from that moment on, he's then now got to deal with the fact that he's a newly married man. There's an expectation that he goes on honeymoon. How does he explain her absence? And indeed, if he has to speak to the police and undergo scrutiny, how will that bear out? What will he say? All the while, he is having to react and think on the spot, which is why I believe he went to the caravan in Skegness to give himself some thinking time.
But instead of parking up in a caravan park, Nutt took the safer option of an isolated lay-by.
I believe the motive for that is it's better to take to a lay-by than a concentrated campsite where there's more people going to sort of find out that actually she wasn't with you.
On his return from the honeymoon, and having bought some thinking time, Nutt reports his wife missing.
It's understood that when he reported her missing, Dawn's body was still in the house.
He says that he put her in a cupboard in the kitchen. Bodies decompose according to the temperature in the environment that they're left, and also what they're left in, whether it's, you know, if it's in mud, grass, where you've got animals, that can then obviously affect the body. But what we believe is that Dawn was in the house, so she was protected from the elements.
The evidence clearly pointed to the fact that the body of Dawn had been hid in a cupboard until Thomas came back from Skegness. And it was only following his return when the issues of her going missing became apparent that he perhaps panicked and he decided to hide the body. And that's when he stuffed her body into the suitcase and pushed it over his garden in the Mac field.
But the most damning evidence yet is CCTV retrieved from Thomas and Dawn's own home on the day he reported her missing.
CCTV was obtained which showed Nut taking a heavy object believed to be a suitcase with wheels. We now believe that had Dawn's body inside and dragging the suitcase out of the back garden. Nut is an imposing character and is an imposing frame. Even for his size, to drag a body in a suitcase would have taken great strength and great effort. So the deposition site of the body would always going to be nearby.
And the prosecution suggests that the place selected to leave Dawn's body was chosen by Nut in order to avoid detection.
When you're dragging such a heavy object and it's in an unnatural way down a street or across a field, the chances of you being exposed or seen by a dog walker or a neighbour or a member of the community as being out of the ordinary is that bit greater. Because when he had dragged the body to the deposition site, he'd already reported Dawn missing.
There is a further revelation in the time of day this footage was filmed.
CCTV captured him returning just in time for an officer to speak with him about Dawn's missing person case. The police officer noted that Thomas Nutt was sweating at the time. Thomas Nutt told the officer that he had been to the shop. It was after the PC left that Thomas Nutt was then seen on CCTV going back into his garden to conceal the marks left by the suitcase. It was broad daylight that Thomas Nutt decided to move Dawn's body and put it in an area behind the couple's home.
The defence raised questions as to why Nutt would take such a risk, but the prosecution have a compelling theory.
So after Thomas Nutt had reported Dawn missing, he was made aware that a visit would be made by an officer, and it was then that he began to panic that they would discover Dawn's body. Thomas Nutt got rid of her body because he knew the police were going to search his house.
It is Dawn Walker's post-mortem results that expose the most disturbing details in the case against Thomas Nutt.
Dawn had suffered significant injuries before and after her death. Before death, she had received injuries to her face, including a laceration and bruising.
Dawn had been strangled. The damage to the neck had been caused with considerable force.
After her death, she'd received injuries to her ribs, including fractures and breaks, which was significant as they suggested that she had been put into the suitcase after her death.
She was a 5-foot lady, and he broke her legs to get her into that suitcase, which showed a complete disrespect for his wife, who he'd murdered or killed, as he would say, accidentally.
So there will have been rigor mortis from Dawn, which explains why Nutt had to break her legs and such like to squeeze her into the suitcase, because her body would have been stiff, but she suffered immensely by the sounds of it.
With all the details of the investigation now laid before the court, it is down to the jury to decide if Thomas Nutt is guilty of murder or the lesser charge of manslaughter.
It is very difficult to determine what goes through the mind of a person when they are attacking somebody else. Was he intending to kill? Was he wanting to harm her in such a way that she would never recover? Was he just a violent person who lost his temper? Was he a narcissist who couldn't tolerate being challenged? Was he a psychopath? Who knows what was in his mind? Who knows what drove him?
The jury was sent out on the 10th of August shortly after 10 a.m. and returned at 2:30. They'd unanimously reached a verdict of guilty for murder.
He sat at the back of the court listening to everything, and then when he was found guilty, it said an expletive to the judge and showed absolutely no remorse whatsoever. The judge summed up to say that he was a bully and that he was a threat to women and that he'd used his physicality to impose his will on women.
The West Yorkshire man who killed his wife on their wedding night and stuffed her body into a suitcase has been jailed for life. A warning: you may find the following video distressing. Police have released CCTV footage showing 46-year-old Thomas Nutt with the suitcase before he dumped Dawn Walker's body in bushes behind their home in Lightcliffe near Halifax. Nutt had strangled the 52-year-old just hours after they were married.
Thomas Nutt was handed a life sentence with a minimum term of 22 years, less time spent on remand in custody. He was told by the judge that he would spend 21 years behind bars before going before the parole board, who will determine whether he is safe to be released. The judge said Dawn had been subjected to domestic violence throughout the course of their relationship.
Everything was a fabrication, and the whole picture became clear. That Thomas was an inveterate liar. He was somebody who was totally intent on protecting himself, having killed Dawn, and kept it up until, in fact, the last minute, until, of course, he was exposed as a liar and a murderer.
The way this case played out was one of the worst cases of domestic violence that I've seen in my career. In particular, the way that Thomas Nutt treated his wife after she died, his disregard for her and her dignity overplayed anything else. He had no compassion and no remorse for what he'd done.
What I would do is to urge anyone who is listening to Dawn's story and other countless victims of abuse to come forward, report to the police. You are not alone. There is a wealth of support out there for you.
The court heard statements from both Dawn's daughter and her sister. Dawn's daughter said she lost a part of her when she got the call saying that her mum's body had been discovered. She described Dawn as a beautiful soul and said she had lost her greatest support.